and welcome everyone. My name is Maria Tranquilli, and I'm a program manager at the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. For those of you who may not know, the NASDAQ Center is a nonprofit dedicated to enabling entrepreneurs from all over the world to realize their maximum potentials and grow. We will open up for Q&A at the end of this event, so please submit your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen throughout this presentation. And none of what we do would be possible without all of the amazing support from our sponsors. We are very humbled by their contributions. During these unique times, we are curious how sentiment is among the entrepreneurs that we work with. We would like to start by taking 2 different polls to let us know how you are feeling about your business right now. Launching poll number 1, how are you currently feeling? Are you feeling fearful, anxious? Are you surviving, or are you feeling optimistic? Please let us know. All right, sharing the results. Lots of optimism in the room. Fantastic. And one additional poll, what is keeping you up at night? Is it finance, sales, or marketing? Is it scaling, pivoting, your team, or surviving? Please let us know. All right, sharing those results. It looks like your teams are what is keeping you up at night. I feel like this is the perfect webinar to help solve some of those issues you might be thinking about. Well, without further delay, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Erin Michelson, founder and CEO of Summery AI. Erin, thank you so much for joining us today. One moment, Erin, we want to unmute you. There we go. Welcome,
there we
Erin.
go. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, I'll leave it to you.
Okay, good deal. So let me go ahead and share my screen and start the presentation today. 1 second. With the slideshow. There we go. So there we are. So just getting going today. Thank you again. Thrilled to be here to be talking about how to leverage AI to attract and engage stakeholders. And one of the things we're really going to talk about is engaging employees. So as Maria just said, with the poll and the focus on team, this is a really timely discussion. I know a couple of you, actually a lot of you, have taken the Kind quiz already, which we're going to talk about. It's one of our AI applications today. So we are going to leave it open there. So kindquiz.com/NASDAQ-EC. And we'll be leaving it up, I think, not only today, but for the entire week, so people can participate. So if you haven't yet, give it a whirl. If we could add a 3rd question to the poll, I don't know if we can do this, but how many people have already taken it? And if so, do you remember what your Kind profile was? So while we go ahead and tabulate those, we'll probably either come back maybe at the end, or I says, pop in at any time and let us know, but we'll go ahead and get going with the presentation. Oh, it came in right away. Wow. Awesome. 92%. I'd like to see that. Good deal. So there we go. Let's get going. So today, just a little bit about who we are in Summery. So I am founder and CEO of Summery AI. We are a lead qualification engine, and we combine behavioral science and AI technology to quantify individual values and score organizational cultural alignment. So that's a little bit of a mouthful, so we're going to unpack that today. One of the core things that we do is really this personalized matching technology that we use based on machine learning and natural language processing and our tools there. And that really enables us to do a high level of match between stakeholders. And we work with employees, customers, students, donors, and we're able then to match up to people, programs, products, so that they are able to choose something that really resonates with them on a values level. And again, we're going to discuss that in detail. As I mentioned, we work in multiple market verticals. We work in corporate. We work with big corporations like Salesforce. We work in the philanthropic space, the social sector primarily, with philanthropic organizations like the Gates Foundation. We work with tons of nonprofit organizations from 1 million to 250 million, and then with the education system as well. So we work a lot with the California Community College system. And again, our tools help the individual stakeholder, whether it's an employee, a donor, or a student, better understand how their values fit in with the overall organization, whether it's the school or the company or the nonprofit. So we have some great ROI. And so we'll kind of go through today as we do very top level, sort of the scientific methodology, what the tools are and how they work, and then really kind of get into a case study so you can see how the tools are used in real life. So let's take a step back for just a second, just kind of look at, why this is necessary, right? So the good news is, cultural alignment and understanding corporate, particularly in the corporate sense, is no longer something that's seen as a nice to have, right? So you have Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, coming out years ago already saying this is actually the core to a profitable business. And so what we're seeing now, though, is that there is this focus on alignment and cultural alignment. So we know culture impacts not only individual sense of belonging, team productivity, but also, again, corporate profitability. And it's really being the focus of new employees and applicants. So, right, the millennials, actually this year are going to be, 50% of the entire workforce, and 78% want their employers to mirror their values. And so actually understanding what your values are and what the company values are is crucial to make sure that you're actually complementary and you're working in a place that's going to feel good for you. Companies are looking at engagement challenges, 87% face culture engagement challenges. We know this, right? We see this every day. Things like the Google Manifesto and Amazon employees walking out. In protest, you see Facebook employees signing petitions and lawsuits with cases like Carta and them. So these are all a very big outward, sign that there's some misalignment. And that's a nice way to say it. Some misalignment going on between the corporation and the individuals who work there. So this is part of the challenge that we're really looking at in today's landscape. Senior executives know that culture is not where it should be. So that's good. Again, they're starting to make a lot more invested in it, and they know it's underperforming by 92% again. So again, not only do we know it's out there, we know it's a problem, but senior management, the C-suite knows it's a problem and are starting to put the resources against it. This is a good thing. So one of our solutions to it are what we call values-based AI applications. And what we do in a nutshell are really 3 steps. We measure values and culture. We have 2 tools to do it that we'll actually look at today, both the KIND quiz, which some of you took, or a lot of you took, and then the net culture score. We then use this for personalization, for this matching, because this is how we get a real sense of how we put or activate our values in a way that's really going to resonate with us. And then we do deep data analytics that we could use for prescriptive programming or product development or relationship and sales, all kinds of ways we could use it. And then we monitor the progress going on. So we set a kind of cultural baseline. So by taking the KIND quiz and understanding what your values are and all your student values or aggregate values of the employees, we're able to set a baseline that we can continue to measure over time. So the C-suite and the executives could actually understand that the investment that they're making in culture is paying off. So those are sort of the things that we do. But again, let's take a step back. So let's start big picture and just define some of these terms, right? So we talk about values, and values really are indicators of an individual's sense of right and wrong. And a lot of times I get the question is, do your values change over time? And the answer is not really, actually. So our values, it's not to say they never change, they just don't change often. What changes is our behavior around the values. So here's an instance of values changing, right? So let's say I grew up in a really conservative environment. I go off to college and my world is sort of open up and I gain a lot more sort of liberal ideas around either different, races and ethnicities and sexual preferences and things like that. So in that sense, my values would change from a very sort of conservative value-based to a more liberal value-based because of sort of a metamorphosis that I go through. So your values can change, but that type of change doesn't happen very often. What really happens usually is that they change in terms of what we call a dynamic framework that we live in. So like internally something could happen. So for instance, I could get married, I could have a child, I could, break my leg, or I could get, a new job. That's something that's happening to me. And so again, while my values won't change, let's say I'm somebody that's very focused on integrity and empathy and innovation, while those don't change, how I describe or how I behave around those values might change. Another thing you could change is actually something that happens internally, right? So if your company is going through a merger, or if you get a new job, again, that might change how you enact your values for the first year or two of those new jobs. You might not be as open or outspoken, or you might be more open and outspoken. It's up to you. And then sort of the third thing is in the dynamic framework. So kind of personally and then internally and externally within the professional sense, is this idea of just the greater framework of what's going on around us. So for instance, climate change is going on, or the political system's going on, that could influence. What we really see, so we've been around for a couple of years now. So we had our predecessor quiz in operation before the 2016 election. And while we didn't see our sort of cohort-based values change after election, how the behavior around those values changed. And so we saw a lot more activity in terms of activism and advocacy efforts as people became more vocal about their values after the 2016 election. So that's how our values are really sort of core of who we are, but again, changes according to our behavior. And so that's what culture is, right? Again, one other term that I just want to take a moment to define is that culture is really the social behaviors and norms found within society. So if we're looking at culture in an organizational sense, let's say we're talking about a corporation. So that's the behavior of everybody. So it's you as an individual and you as your teammate and you as all the aggregate of all employees, all of how you all behave, that makes up the culture, right? And so we also see this in schools. As I said, we do a lot of work with schools and campuses. And what's really interesting is right now, as colleges move to 100% virtual environment, their culture is now 100% virtual as well. And so how do you create and nurture culture and a sense of belonging for individuals, and then the aggregate of all the student body in 100% virtual environment? That's what we're dealing with. So the two sort of spectrums of values on an individual level and then culture on an organizational level. So these are the two things we measure. And most importantly, we measure the difference between the two. And so we measure the delta between individual values and organizational culture. And that's how we come up with sort of a score to measure and score that, so we can tell how it changes over time. So let's look at the values that we measure. So we quantify 5 values. We call them dimensions of empathy, integrity, agility, innovation, and disruption. And we went through I have a whole scientific team at Summery of data, computer, cognitive, and behavioral scientists. And we did a ton of research to come up with sort of these 5 values that we thought were really the core to culture moving forward. We then went and defined them. And I think what's really interesting is we didn't just define them. We actually went through an entire crowd truthing exercise to make sure we remove as much of our scientific bias as we can. So it's not sort of the Summery team's, definition of empathy, but we crowdsourced it in all around the world actually to get everybody's view of what empathy or integrity is, and we measured against that. So these are the 5 values that underscore everything that we do. And here's a little bit more about the development process. And I won't go into it because it gets very scientific. Just know if you're interested and really want to sort of nerd or geek out on it, we do have a white paper on Summery.ai, and you could download it for free. And it goes through all of our validity and reliability testing and all the results to that. So definitely, if you're into the data science side of it and around the NLP, then definitely feel free to download the white paper. But there's 2 things I really want to focus on here, right? So there was the research of the domain that I talked about, sort of doing this kind of exhaustive study of what is culture and what are values and sort of personalities that are out there now. But for us, the really core part of it was step 2, which is identifying the keywords And then again, step 4, as I said, sort of crowd truthing to remove as much bias as we can. So let's just really focus on those 2. Here is a look at just a snapshot of a cultural dictionary. So what our Summery scientific team did is we created basically a cultural dictionary of 3,500 words. And our lead scientist, Dr. Helga Wild, led this effort for us. She's a background in neuropsychology and a cultural anthropologist by training, so super cool. And so what she did is she and our cognitive scientists went and looked at 2 main kind of core personality tests that are out there in the main canons, right? So the Moral Foundations Questionnaire and the Big 5 personality traits. The acronyms usually OCEAN or CANOE, whichever you do, but around conscientiousness and neurosis and things like that. So, and then we use our own proprietary studies with Summery, because again, we've been in the market a while too, so we could use our own data to train our data. And so we actually created this map, or this semantic map or dictionary. And these are all the words that are based off of those 5 key dimensions I just mentioned a moment ago: empathy, integrity, innovation, disruption, and agility. And we developed this 3,500 semantic map. We're actually going through a process right now where we're extending it hugely. It's getting much more sophisticated. So this, we're looking at really the words. Now we're actually getting into this next level of accuracy around bywords and about how words are used in sentences and in syntax and all of that, so that when we use this as our core of our natural language processing, again, we have the most accurate definition for each of these words we can. And that definition, of course, is based on how they're used. And so the core, again, of what we do is this cultural dictionary. We then use it in a lot of different ways, right? We use it in our personalization tools. We use it in our resource matching tools, our data scraping. We use it in our NLP for the scoring of organizational culture. So we'll talk about each of those ways that it's actually deployed. So the first of our 2 applications is the Kind Quiz. So again, a lot of you have taken it. And this is really our personalization and engagement tool that we've developed. And the benefits, we are a SaaS company, so we sell to organizations, is it's 100% virtual, which for us was a good thing, because when the world sort of changed with COVID-19, we have a 100% virtual team, 100% virtual tool, so we could immediately go in and start deploying, for instance, in the college campuses, which had to go to 100% virtual in a heartbeat. And so it is definitely a COVID-ready tool. We engage employees from a values perspective. Again, this is what sets us apart and what's different than something like the Myers-Briggs or DISC or any of the other sort of personality tests out there. We do not consider ourselves a personality test. We consider ourselves a value profile. Again, that has this proprietary database of values that we've then defined and match against. It helps employers actually understand, helps employees understand where they have a greater capacity for engagement. So again, if you're a nonprofit, for instance, that we work with, actually understanding who is open to greater engagement is something that you're very interested in, right? Because that's much more cost effective for you to get them involved in your nonprofit if somebody's actually open to more engagement. And then we use the data. So as a data house, right, everything we do is around this data. We're able to more cost effectively segment the audience. Again, whether it's students or employees or donors who are open to more engagement, to get them more involved in the organization. And the 2 last things we do are prescriptive analytics, right, to laser focus our programming. And so an interesting example of this. So first, let's talk about prescriptive analytics. Prescriptive analytics, as we know, is sort of one step beyond predictive analytics. And predictive analytics is like when you buy a new pair of shoes on Amazon, right? And so you buy your shoes, and then the next day and the next day and the next day, you keep getting ads for shoes because you bought shoes before, so you like shoes. So obviously you're going to buy shoes again. That's what the predictive algorithm is built on. What prescriptive analytics is actually one step beyond. So basically, I don't need to buy shoes for you to know that I like shoes. And so this is a way where we don't need past behavior to predict future behavior. We actually understand what your future behavior could be and will be and probably will be based on your values profile. And so one way that this is in use, one of our clients was the Natural History Museum of LA. And so they used us to actually have their membership base take the Kind Quiz. It was a customized version of the Kind quiz. And then they were able to actually understand the values, the core values of their membership base, so that they could then use that information to curate upcoming exhibits in the museum, right? And so they didn't have to like have an exhibit, which takes a ton of time and money to launch and see if people would then come. They actually had an understanding beforehand what the membership would really like about the exhibits and then build the exhibits around that. So again, highly cost-effective segmentation. And then again, ongoing metrics. And this is becoming much more important for those of you who understand kind of around ESG or environmental, social, and governance compliance issues that are out there. This is a way to actually measure the S in ESG, or the social and ESG. And so when companies have to start reporting in, you know, how they're actually abiding by their ESG standards, this is a way to do it. Again, you've set a cultural baseline and you can measure ongoing. So that's our tool. So for those of you who've taken in, those of you haven't yet, I hope you will. So your Kind profile, you know, you take it's just a 4-minute mobile optimized quiz that you take. At the end, and you know, you're instantly given 1 of 10 different profile types. And so my type is altruistic. But if you're altruistic too, we won't have the same profile at the end, because even though it's only 18 questions in 4 minutes, we're actually looking at 98,304 different combinations of profile characteristics. And so while the Kind quiz is very simple on the front end, it's very robust on the back end. And so again, we're not all the same, right? Even if we're the same profile, like altruistic and altruistic, we're different. And it's this level of understanding your value profile that allows us to match you with nonprofit organizations or employee engagement programs or volunteer opportunities, or like I said, museum exhibits in a way that's really going to resonate with you. This is important because a lot of time when you have things to choose from, you get a little bit of fatigue from having to make the choice. So take, for instance, with Salesforce, as you come in, they have about like 200 pre-approved nonprofits that their employees can volunteer with. But that's kind of hard for me as an employee, right? I need to choose from 1 of 200. And I like education, I like animals, I like kids, and I like healthcare. Like all those things are important to me. So how do I choose? And so what we are able to do is, like, of the 200, we're going to match you with the 3 optimal opportunities for you that most resonate with you on a value profile. So if you're given 3 optimal opportunities, you're much more likely to engage in one of them rather than having to choose from the 200. Really kind of cool thing about the Kind profile, we are multilingual. We actually just launched today in our first international country, and we're in use in 146 countries, which is 75% of the world's population are using and participating in the Kind quiz. So here's the second tool. So that's the Kind quiz. And again, the Kind quiz is measuring individual values from me as an individual, or from you as an individual. Now, we could also measure culture or values, the amalgamation of values and behavior, which is culture, on the organizational level. And we do this by actually looking at the net culture score, right? And again, we're using our proprietary dictionary here to go out and get information about the organization. So we use all publicly available information out there about the organization. So for corporations, we look at quarterly earnings reports. For nonprofits, we look at 990 reports, job descriptions, sustainability reports, mission statements, all types of things. And so what we're measuring here, this idea that it's publicly available information is critical, because this is what the organization wants the audience or the public to believe their values are, right? Or their aspirational values. So this is who they say their values are, or their culture is. We know that because we're looking at what is actually out there in the universe that they say. And so this, again, is an organization's aspirational values. We then are able to measure that against, you know, my values as an employee, or our values as a group of employees, to measure the delta between the two. So if I move us over a little bit there, then we'll see the score in the middle of the sunflower. There's a 92. That's the score between an organization. Here, I think this is just Summaries we're using as an example. Summery is an organization, like what we put out there, that this is who we say our culture is, and the values of all aggregate employees. And so we measure the alignment between the two. Now, we also measure the individual values. We don't ascribe a score to values. This was to an individual, because this was an ethical data decision that we made early on, that we didn't want to assign a number to an individual. that we wanted to present the individual in the bar chart where we could see the complexity. And so the bar chart actually represents, again, our 5 dimensions of empathy, integrity, innovation, disruption, and agility, and how those are represented in my values, plus the employees. And then we look at it in coordination or in alignment with the organization. And so again, as a SaaS product, this is one of the products that we provide our organizations. Again, the key to this is our dictionary, because that's how we go out and score the organization. And that's at the basis of the questions of the KIND quiz. So again, measuring the delta between aspirational goals and actual values. And that's how we set the cultural baseline. So let's kind of talk about it too. So here, this is kind of the finale. This is what we get at the end, right? So if we go back, let's say 1. So if you are in alignment as an individual, let's say that's the yellow bar of me as an individual, with the gray bar that if we're really in alignment, then what you're going to get is this like harmony match between a company and an employee. And this is when you're in alignment, right? What now I think is really interesting is we don't always want to be in alignment, right? So we don't, it's subjective. So it's good to have most of your employees in alignment, right? Because you want sort of everybody kind of marching to the beat of the same drum, so to speak. But you don't want everybody in alignment, because if you're too high in alignment, then you kind of have groupthink. So there's an amount of disruption that you want. We think our team, it's about 8 to 10% of disruption that's actually critical to innovation. And so you want to introduce that at the team level and the overall company level. So if you're out there and using these tools for recruitment, you may or may not want somebody in alignment. You might want somebody who is out of alignment because they're going to bring a fresh perspective to the organization. Or you're going to want somebody maybe who is complementary values. And so whether or not your values are aligned, or they're complementary, or they're diverse, that all depends on you as an individual. It depends on the team. It depends on the company. And so we don't ever want to make any sort of blanket statement. It's really important that we don't do that a score of X is a good score or not. It's only a score according to what the organizational goals are and your goals as an individual. And the important thing, and why we actually provide each individual with an overview of your profile, your value profile, as soon as you take it, is again, from a data ethics perspective. We think it's very important that we don't only empower the organization with understanding your values, but we empower you as an individual to understand your values as well. So while the organization is looking at you and how you align, you can also look at the organization about how you're aligning and whether or not this is an organization or a company that you want to continue working for. So let's get into a use case, right? So recruiting for talent and cultural ads. So here we're really looking at building inclusion, right? And again, inclusion doesn't mean everybody thinking the same thing at all, right? It's actually, making sure that there's a diversity of perspectives and that it's a good, healthy mix where there's lots of innovation, lots of empathy around understanding and trying to understand every perspective and background that people are coming from. And so the way this would work is that you would invite and activate applicant values. So if you're recruiting for it, let's say you're an applicant, right? So you would want, you're in a company and you're a hiring manager. And so you're hiring for a position, you would ask as part of the hiring process, all applicants to take the KIND quiz, and then you would get their values profile. Now you would understand the value profile you're looking for because you would already understood the net culture score of the organization. You would already understand the culture of the organization, and then you understand sort of the team values and where this position fits in with the team values. And again, if it's an engineering team around, product creation, things like that, you might want high disruption, like a lot of, let's break it attitudes. But if it's a program manager position, you might want high empathy. So again, what the value profile is for that particular position depends on what's needed in the team and what's needed at the company at the time. But asking the applicant to take the KIND quiz, you'll actually have a better understanding of their values right there. What we think is actually really great too is, again, everybody's out there saying, we value you, we value your thoughts and your perspective. This is a way to actually activate the values. So I think for those companies who say that values are important, number one, asking or having a tool that asks an applicant their values is first and foremost. And number two, we activate those values. So again, Summery makes a donation on behalf of everybody who takes the KIND quiz as a cohort. And so your values are activated. So even if an applicant may not be a perfect fit for that particular position, they have a pretty good experience because they take the kind quiz, which is a positive experience. They get the overview as a gift, a 3-page overview of what their value profile is there, and then they're instantly activated as well. So by taking it, a donation is being made and generated. And so it's a positive experience, I think, for the organization. And then so there you have, so the individual takes the kind quiz. You already understand what the cultural baseline is, right? Because you have the net culture score of the organization. You're able then to understand optimal team profiles around what sort of values are most going to resonate in this position and be, a positive in this position. And then you can match employees or match applicants with this position. Now, what we really like about this too is that by looking at a values perspective, a lot of times employees or applicants within your current employee pool will sort of rise to the top. So people you've never thought of before will have a values matrix that's actually going to match through the position really well. So again, we think it's a way to really diversify the employee base within your own company. And so again, that's one of the ways we look at it. And then again, we measure this over time about how high productivity or high performing the team is based on this value profile. So again, as we wrap up here, we're looking at sharing social impact, right? So again, I think the key to it is not only asking about values, but actually activating the values, because we don't want to just be data for data's sake. We want to empower the individual with their own data, which is really critical, but also empower the individual by activating their values with a donation. So again, as a social impact company, Summery does make a donation to everybody. So everybody who's taking the kind quiz today as part of NASDAQ in the presentation, we're going to leave it open for a week, and then sort of next week around October 5th or so, we'll send out an announcement looking at everybody's aggregate values, and then we'll make a donation announcement. And that donation will be out of our database of 10,000 social impact activities that we've used our AI or natural language processing tools to scrape and match against your particular, in this case, the NASDAQ cohort profile. And then we'll choose out of that 10,000 the optimal activity that represents all of your values. And that's it. I think that's it, right? So let's change the way we create change. So this is sort of our attitude. We're looking at systemic change as an organization ourselves.
Erin, thank you so much. We have some really interesting questions. So before we hop into Q&A, everyone, I would love to invite you, please submit any questions that you have in the chat or in the Q&A function. And as we go, you can take a look at the kind quiz yourself, maybe complete that. I know it takes 3 to 4 minutes to do, and it's really, really interesting to see some results. I actually am blown away about how accurate these results are. I really love it. So, Erin, are you ready for some Q&A from us?
Yeah, hit me. Let's do it.
Okay, great. Okay, so we have some very tactical questions, and then some questions that are more around the breadth of AI and how to apply this within a company. So first and foremost, how do you handle data protection? Do you have any advice for companies that are handling that, and what are you doing specifically?
Yeah, so we have published our data again, our ethical data policy. Data protection is something very important to us. We've taken a number of steps on our end, actually not to release the most sensitive data. And we also work with the company's current platform. So we don't have our own platform, so we're an application. So whatever platform you're using, whatever applicant tracking system or CSR system or CRM system, we simply just link to your existing system. So the security remains on your site, in your system. But the things that we're doing specifically, so for instance, we actually only have 2 people in our company that have the raw data. So while you're given the aggregate, your profile type 1 of 10, we actually don't release the raw answers, even to our clients, the organizations, right? Because we want to protect the individual. And so we don't actually release that data, only the aggregate of the profile type. The demographic screens we do, but they generally already have those demographics anyway. We specifically don't ask in our quiz as well, things like income or age, like age is a range, we don't ask for income, any of that. And so that is also to protect data. So we're really just looking at the values profile. Again, for us too, it is about empowering the individual with their own data. So protecting the data and how it can be used, again, not releasing the raw answers, deciding not to ascribe a number to a person, like those are all ethical data choices. And then again, empowering the individual with their data as well.
Oh, I love that conversation around ethical data choices. That I think is at the forefront of so many conversations right now. So we have a question here. If a team were to complete a quiz like this, how might you advise that teams start to use that information to work together?
Well, I think the first conversation is what are the goals of the team, right? What are the objectives of the team? So everybody will take, I think even before, you send out the kind quiz, just kind of say like, what is the objectives? Are you looking for more team cohesion? Are you looking at more team, diversity of thought and innovation? Are you looking like, what is the goal of the team? And so once you understand what the goal of the team is, all the individuals can take the kind quiz and they get their individual profiles. And then we'll do a data analytic report called a summary. It's where we get our name actually, where it's a 10 to 15 page data analytic report that we actually look at the value profiles, and we're able then to, at a very deep level, understand the team as an entity itself, right? And so you guys have your individual profiles, but we're very much interested in what we call the cohort data analytics. And we spend 10 to 15 pages of really diving into that. One of the things that we also do immediately too is we curate what we call 3 campaigns. So let's say if your goal is greater innovation. So one of our college clients, they wanted greater innovation as a college campus. They wanted to be seen as innovative. And so both faculty, administration, students, all 3 took the kind quiz. We then saw where innovation was. As it turns out, actually, there was a lot of innovation in students. And so we then prescribed activities to have student-led activities to incorporate innovation through student activities with on campus, not just for students themselves, but for the students to actually influence faculty and administration because they were much more innovative. And so that's one of the ways. So we do, again, we sort of measure, we analyze, and then we activate. Sort of in the 3 ways. And so the kind quiz is just the way to measure. The summary reports is the analysis. And then we data curate these campaigns to meet your goal and then measure it over time.
Oh, interesting. Really quick for everyone in the audience, we've had Isis, who is an incredible team member at NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center, pop into the chat our survey. So take a few moments either during this Q&A and or after this session to fill out that survey, letting Erin know what you thought of this session and letting NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center know what you thought of this session. We would love to see either more like this and or other subject matter experts that you are interested in. So take a moment to fill that survey out for us. Erin, so we have so many different, let's see. How would you balance, this is maybe a little bit of a question that might ruffle feathers, and I'm actually curious to see what you think. So how do you balance the idea of using AI for inclusion with the idea of AI removing the human element of inclusion?
Well, AI isn't a substitution for human eyes, right? It's not a substitution. So we use AI as a tool. We put human eyes against it. Again, it's our real life scientists who are the ones who are directing the AI. Even with our summary reports, they're automated, but we have human eyes, and it goes through 2 rounds of scientific reviews, both first from the behavioral science team and then from the data science team, right? Because they're the ones who are actually doing the analysis. We then actually, again, use, well, 2 things. One, we use the personalization, to score it. So we can automatically prescribe opportunities at the individual level, but then at the team level, again, we put human eyes against it. So for us, it's not an either or, AI is out there. There's a lot of great tools for it, but we do manage it with our scientific team.
Excellent. Thank you, Erin. So we have a question here. What messages about AI would you communicate to each stakeholder? I think maybe to be more specific here, if let's say you have investors that you're looking to court, and they're not able to fill out a quiz like this, how might you actually use this kind of technology to support your decisions in approaching them?
That's a great question. So that is actually the great thing about the Net Culture Score, because you don't, since we're using publicly available information, you actually don't need the organization to agree to participate. So if you're, let's say you're a startup organization and you're looking at taking funding from a VC and you want to know if it's a good cultural fit, you'll know what your own culture is. If you all take the, kind quiz and you have, an analytic report, you'll know what your culture is. But you could actually just have a net culture score for like the top 50 VCs out there, and you could actually see where you are in alignment with them. And so we would be looking at, again, the job descriptions, not quite quarterly earnings reports because VCs don't have that, but financial statements, public, Glassdoor ratings, sustainability reports, all those things. So anything out there in the public, we go and we scrape using our tools, and that's how we discern the cultural score. So I do think it's interesting, like we are being hired now by corporations to look at their clients, because if they say like, we're committed to sustainability and environmental, social, and governance issues, right now, the only way to really measure that is self-reporting, especially on the social side of it. This is a way to actually remove the self-reporting and go out there and score them yourself. So if you're a big company and you want your vendors, for instance, to, be sustainable as well and be, in line with your ESG principles, this is a way to actually understand that removes the self-reporting element. The same thing with your clients and the same thing with your employees. So in a way, we actually think it's just far more accurate because it removes that self-reporting and because it sort of equalizes because we're taking the same types of information.
This is so interesting. So we have a follow-up question to that. How might we, or are you seeing specific trends when it comes to, let's say, early stage founders or entrepreneurs and or VCs? Can you share a little bit about some of the larger trends that you're seeing currently?
Yeah, I mean, that's just great because we've been around for a while, so we are seeing trends now, and we're using actually our own data. As I said, we're starting to deepen and deepen the accuracy of our own data right now. And we have so much data, we're just using our own data to train our data, which is awesome, right? So it's very accurate is what it is. And so one thing that we're seeing is actually leadership skills that have come out. And so we're able to now discern what the value profile is of leaders. And we see this because as we look cross vertical, so again, we work in corporations, schools, nonprofit organizations. We look at the executive directors of nonprofit organizations, the presidents of colleges, the CEOs and the C-suites of corporations, and entrepreneurs who have started their own company. They all have predominantly one profile type, and that's a mix of empathy and innovation. And I think that's really interesting that empathy is up there for sure. Like you cannot be a leader without being empathetic, or you can't be a good leader, I should say, without having some empathy. So that's one of the trends that are coming out. So my team now is starting to look more into leadership, and we even see it at like students who are in student government, because those are the leaders of the school, and they have the same profile as the president of the college or a CEO. So there are some distinct profile types. I also see it in terms of like independent contributors, right, who tend to be very disruptive. They're not working with a team. They like to work by themselves. We have a lot of scientists on our team, and we have a lot of high disruption. I'm always begging for a little more empathy for my team. And as we go out and we're starting to hire, we are actually hiring for more empathy to make us more in balance with all the disruption we have going on. Everybody always poking holes and pushing the boundaries. Yeah.
I'll say that's actually fantastic to hear. I think everyone wants a little bit more empathy in their life. So if leaders are actually, that's a reflection of the leaders that you're seeing. That's, I think, really exciting.
It could be, I have to say though, but these are the leaders that understand culture and are like, using the kind quiz. So so I would think like it's a little bit of a, like they are already empathetic because they understand the importance of culture, and they're putting sort of their money where their mouth is. And so the leaders who are doing it, it might be a little self-defined there. So if we opened it up to like all CEOs, which we could do, then yeah, it may be. So that's why I think good leaders are, I want to qualify, I think good leaders have high empathy.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Erin. We have a question specifically in the chat from Pep. How do donors use AI to evaluate and support nonprofits?
So, So how do donors or how do nonprofit organizations? So here's how nonprofit organizations are the ones that hire us. And so what we do, for instance, again, we work with small, like only $1 million up to 250 million, like a whole range of nonprofits. So they'll deploy the Kind quiz out to their donor base. And what they do then is at the end, now the kind of the free version of what you're taking, there isn't any matching. You just get the overview of the profile and we make a donation. But for our clients, a lot of times there's, 3 organizations that we match to. So we would match that individual donor with 3 opportunities within the nonprofit, so that they could, in terms of volunteering or giving or learning or reading or sharing or supporting, there's all kinds of different ways that we could do it. So we'll actually take and we'll match the 3 to boost engagement. So from a nonprofit, so from the donor perspective, they have a nonprofit that they're a part of. Right now, I don't have to make a decision about how to be involved and support this nonprofit. 3 of the most optimal ways based on my value profile will be given to me. And we're seeing high engagement rates of 30 or 40% because people are actually, it is resonating with them. So for instance, we're also seeing the average online donation through our tools is twice what it is on average, right? Because again, our ability to choose the program that they want to support is so right on. We're seeing a huge influence of not just engagement, but actually a doubling of the engagement level through actual donation dollars. Yeah, so that's one way. Nonprofits can also use it too, because if they're looking at doing future programming, so again, sort of like the Natural History Museum, if you're looking at doing future programming, you want to understand what's really important to your stakeholders, and that's the donors involved and the constituents, not even the donors, but maybe in the constituents of the communities you serve. And so actually understanding what the constituents, what their values are, what resonates with them will help you to better tailor your programming in a way that's going to resonate with them, both constituents and donors.
Erin, thank you. And I think on the flip side, the question would be, are donors actually looking, if nonprofits can use this lens, can donors, and are they also using this lens of value-based, I think, value-based funding? So is there a way that a nonprofit can forecast or see or understand the way a donor is actually viewing them? And maybe that's value-based, maybe it isn't.
Nonprofit is viewing them. There is a way, again, for the donor. So if a donor wants to give in a way that's going to resonate, again, so we have the open source matching, but for the donor, for the nonprofit to actually get more donors and to understand them a little bit, because there's such a high virality to the quiz. So we're seeing, so for instance, like when we worked with the Gates Foundation, their entire database of the division we were working with tripled in 3 months, right? Because people were sharing it and liked it. So there's a way for a nonprofit or a donor to actually say like, oh, it's resonating on a huge scale, right? And so so the nonprofit will say like, okay, this was a small subset, but these are all the people, 3 to 1, 4 to 1 that are coming to us based on it. So again, it's resonating. Does that answer the question?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And Pep, let us know if you have any follow-up questions to that specifically. Thank you so much.
We actually have 2. So I'm sorry to jump in. So we actually have our case studies are on our website too. So if you want a case study for the college system or for like the Gates Foundation, it's on our website. There's a 2-page overview of what their goals were, what their goals are, what our tool was, what we did, what the results are. And so there is a 2-page, client success story up there too that might get into more of the details.
Erin, that's fantastic. Actually, we do have a question from the audience wondering, would you be able to share a success story or a brief explanation, maybe some step-by-step instruction on how a smaller organization, kind of an early stage company, how they might use this with the small team that they currently have, if they know that there are some issues within culture, and they know that they actually want to be proactive, how might they, in a step-by-step way, use this information to change that culture?
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to use us, Summery, as an example, because we're currently out here. We're searching for our first CTO. So we're out there and we have applicants coming in. Again, as I said, like we know our own score. We know of what our culture is. We know where we are. We know we're actually very heavy in disruption. Like I said, disruption is somewhat hard to manage because it's a bunch of individual contributor types. One of the things with disruptors, they're always, love to poke hole in arguments, are always pushing the boundaries and things like that, which is great because that's where you get new ideas and innovation. But it is also like just a little bit harder to manage, right? Especially as you're growing bigger, and getting big enough to sort of outside the one-on-one relationships a little bit. And so we're actually looking now, I was interviewing CTOs this morning, we asked them to take the kind quiz, and I am looking at their value profile to make sure it's going to be a complementary mix. As I said, I am actively recruiting for value profiles with more empathy in them. And so I will probably not hire somebody that has a core. So of the 10, there were 5 core dimensions and 5 composites. I probably would not hire a core disruptive just because there's already so much disruption that we're trying to bring along some of the more innovation and empathy. And so I am actually looking for that as a hire. So here we are, a small company, and we're looking at recruiting. I know who we are. I know the makeup of my team, and I know the value profile that I want for the new hire. That's so instrumental because they're going to be building out teams in the C-level as a leader of the company. And so I want high empathy there. So that's, I think, a pretty good example.
Yeah, absolutely. What great strategy. And I think we have one final question. I'm actually very personally interested. What is the background behind you? Kindness is what we're all here for. Can you let us?
Kindness is what we're all here for. So yeah, so these are our Zoomscapes. So last week we decided that, everybody, we think kindness is everywhere. We're a social impact, very optimistic company, right? We think kindness is everywhere, but we think that people are doing a lot in terms of like private kindnesses, like the private act of kindnesses, which are beautiful, really beautiful. But we kind of think the world right now needs like outward kindness. We should fling it on the walls. And so we're in the conversation, we're like, let's just fling it. And so we're going to make some Zoom backgrounds with kindness slogans and motifs behind us. And so every week, this is the first week. And then for the next 3 weeks, we're going to be offering Zoom backgrounds with kindness motifs like this behind us. So tomorrow on LinkedIn, if you go to Summery or my LinkedIn, you're going to see the next Zoomscape. So there's this one that's already up there that you can download, and there'll be the next Zoomscape around kindness tomorrow. So for the next month, we're flinging kindness to the walls.
Love it. We love it. Actually, so I think we have time for one more question from Demetris. It is a very interesting question. Are you keeping the value results for a company dynamic and correlate the results with the company's success?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. Yeah, and so that's what we mean. We set a baseline and we measure it over time, right? So now we are still a young nonprofit. And so as we're getting into multi-year agreements and multi-year relationships with our clients, we continue to curate. So we curate as a SaaS company, we do activities every month. So we're providing them more information every month and more curation. And then as they implement it, we're actually tracking back, which is how we know our ROI is so high, right? Because if we say like, we think that you should focus on this type of fundraising environment or this type of fundraising program, we actually track, how it worked before, how it works now, whether it's more donors, deeper donors, higher donation amounts, all those things we track, like that's a real ROI. The same on the company, like we've had great success in what we call the fringe. A lot of times there's companies, actually that's what Google calls it, the fringe, is sort of 40% that no matter what you do, you can't get them to engage in any of your employee activities. Well, we've actually had really good success with the kind quiz, getting people to take the kind quiz, which again is pretty fun and positive and short, so say that, and then actually matching them up with activities that resonate with them so they take activities. So we've been able to break down that barrier of that 40% of fringe that have not been able to engage and make inroads there. So again, we're measuring not only like engagement levels, multiple engagement. We have these super users that we measure as well, where 10% of the population comes back again and again and again. Those are your super users. Those are the champions sort of that you want within your corporation to sort of lead efforts. And so again, this measuring over time is very important because up until now, there hasn't been a way to quantify values or culture. And so, you would do these activities, but there was no way to know that they really resonate. But now we can measure it.
Fantastic, Erin. So interesting. I think we're just about at time. Are there any parting words of wisdom that you would like to share with our community?
No, I don't know. I think I have to say, going back, like I was really kind of heartened to see that so many people were optimistic and feel optimistic right now. That makes me feel good. I was as a participant, as a panelist, I couldn't participate in the poll on the back end, and I knew I would have said optimism too. And I just thank you, everybody, for choosing that and feeling that way. And I'm really enheartened as we look forward that people on an individual level are feeling optimistic about what we could do individually and what we could do in concert. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you to everybody.
Oh, Erin, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you. For everyone that is still with us, please take a few moments to fill out the survey that we have. We would love for Erin and NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center to read your comments and to understand what you would love to hear from us in the future. Again, thank you so much, Erin, for taking the time to speak to our community and to share your insights. You set such a great overview today. And on behalf of NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center and everyone in attendance, we sincerely thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Absolutely. And for all of you still with us, we would love for you to join us in our next webinars. We have one coming up tomorrow, Mastering the VC Fundraising Pitch, and also this upcoming Thursday, How to Guide the Perfect Customer Journey. For all of you still with us, thank you again, and we look forward to having you this upcoming week. Thank you.